So I'd like to welcome both of you to our panel. Nice to have you.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Very, very honored to be here.
Great. Why don't you each, a lot of us know a lot about the whole food plant-based speakers who are speaking at the panel, and a lot of us are meeting you for the first time. So why don't you each take a little time and tell us who you are and what's been going on the last 10 years and what caused you to write books and get involved in the health movement. Michael, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'm Michael Sherer, and I spent 30 years in IT leadership, both in management and consulting. And I would say that family health issues got me into the health field. IT people are known for being able to find stuff and sort of come up to speed on other people's disciplines. And so I found myself kind of hanging out on PubMed, reading primary research to figure out my mother had pulmonary fibrosis, my father had diabetes, my daughter had ADHD, and some autoimmune issues. I got diabetes. And so these are things that they were all incurable diseases, right? And that's one of the things that I sort of have this feeling like I want to know the root cause. And so I was in there looking at things like the gut microbiome. And around the early 2010s, I began to notice research on oxidative stress and redox imbalance and how it was involved in heart disease and kidney disease and liver disease and neurodegenerative disease and cancer. And eventually it was kind of like, well, I guess oxidative stress causes disease generally. And about that time, Dean Jones and Helmut Cease, who are sort of luminaries in the field of redox biology, published a paper called the Redox Code, where they pretty much said it, that redox systems are involved architecturally in disease. And it's, however it is in classic scientific form, it's said in such a way that it took me several years to figure out that's what they were saying. It was pretty opaque. At the same time, I was I just expected that somebody would write this book for consumers on oxidative stress and redox imbalance. And when it never happened, I said, well, I guess I have to write this book. So my first scientific presentation at a medical conference occurred in 2017, and it was actually called One Disease, Redox Imbalance. And then in 2020, that became a book as I retired from IT. And that book got me sort of connected with Dean Jones, who wrote the Redox Code. And we sort of have Wednesday morning hangouts talking about health stuff, and it's so much fun. And Dean has been very helpful in my second book, Resilience. And Dean takes a very special interest in trying to communicate complex science to a consumer audience. So it's been wonderful to work with him. He's really a fabulous scientist, and I want to give him lots of credit for the things that I'm coming up with. So that's probably a good place to stop.
Okay, thank you. Brandy?
My name is Brandy Gillmore, and this is honestly the last thing that I ever thought I would be doing. So I used to do network engineering and operations, and I had an accident. And technically, I had two accidents, a car accident and a fall back in 2003. And my entire life changed. I went from working a full job and careers that I love to being wheelchair, walker, cane in extreme pain. And my doctors telling me that there was nothing they could do for me. And I was in so much pain. I mean, I was on morphine for over 6 years and just an absolute mess. And, and so I started trying everything that I could find from diet and supplements, and I mean, special water from the Amazon, like literally everything, magnets and frequencies and every therapy that I could find. And while those could be great, my body wasn't healing. And I think what was profound and shocking was as I started looking at the mind, which is I would have thought I had an accident, I have physical injuries. There's no way my mind could heal my body. But some of the stuff that I started reading was mind blowing. For example, people with multiple personality disorder can have different ailments when they're in different personalities. Like one personality can have high blood pressure, diabetes. Another one doesn't have it. Another one might have back pain or neck pain. And there was even a study in the medical journals that where a person was blind in some personalities, but not in others. And it was mind blowing. And then I started, of course, then there's, we all know stress affects the physical body. And then not only that, but, the nocebo, the placebo. And so everything was pointing to the mind. And that, of course, I kept thinking, but the physical body, but it was even shown that after surgery, if a person was optimistic, they could heal a lot faster. And if somebody was stressed or in negative anger, fear, all of that, they could heal a lot slower and have a much higher rate of complications, even when they're laying in bed doing nothing but stressing. They can have, cellular proliferation. So the body's repair system was slower. And so it really made me start looking at the mind-body connection. And ultimately, that's what it is. I started figuring out how to use it to heal myself. After I got better, I thought, people are going to think this is impossible. Yes, we've all heard stress affects the physical body, which is so funny because we think it's impossible. But, we've all heard the phrase somebody saying before, calm down, you're going to have a heart attack. So we know that emotions affect the physical body. And yet we still have a hard time believing that they can actually heal. And so that's what I did is I started showing it under medical equipment. I just wanted people to know, because I went from feeling like I didn't have a life or future to healing myself, making a full recovery. And I thought, I just want everybody to know we can do this. And then it just became this thing where I just started showing people, then showing under medical equipment, then doing a TED talk. And so it's been this amazing spiral and so I just released my book also showing the science behind it, the understanding of how incredible our minds really are. And so that's what I've been up to, this incredible journey.
Okay, great. Thank you. So assume that among our audience, people watching, there's someone with obesity, someone with high blood pressure, someone's got osteoporosis, someone's got a heart issue, someone's got breast cancer. Assume there's all people with plenty of ailments sitting here watching. What do you say to each of them? They would absolutely love to heal. They have families, they have friends, they have lives. They would like nothing more than to be their best, healthiest self. They come to you and they say, what advice do you have? So what advice do each of you have? Because these people, that you have their cooperation, they'll do whatever it takes. What are you telling them that they should do to heal? Michael, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think we all have goals and limitations, right? Like there are things that, we have health issues, we have limited time, we have things that are priorities for us. So like, are you willing to change your diet? Are you willing to exercise more or able? Are you interested in supplements? Are you interested in pharmaceutical approaches? And so I have tended to approach this, looking at the medical system as it is and how we expect it to become in the future. And what I see is that it's much more holistic. And there are a few things in my resilience book and whatnot that I've put in there. One is to simply be clear about what your goals and directions are, what your personal mission is, and how your future health fits into that. Like what's your motivation for having good health? And that provides motivation for following through on the lifestyle effects of what you're going to undertake. Because the things that work are the things that you do. And, so I think that part of what's exciting about what Brandy is doing is, that's an area where, I think she's showing very conclusively that our thoughts and emotions are very powerful stressors or eustressors that affect health outcomes. And so, I feel like the idea that I'm going to talk say just a little bit about resilience, which is your ability to withstand stress in life and without having symptoms and recovering quickly from life's challenges. But the things that boost stress are typically what we call eustressors, right? Like exercise, eating plants, saunas, uh, and occasionally de-stressors like sleep and recovery and some of the mind and emotional work that Brandy's talking about. And so I tend to look at this and say, what we're after is coming together and making a collection of resilience habits that work for us, things that we either enjoy doing, that we are willing to do, that all make a contribution to our own stress resilience. And when we get that working all in the right direction, we tip the scales in our favor, because chronic stress is something that it's frankly a chronic aging phenotype. If you are under chronic stress, you are aging more rapidly than other people. And so what I am after is to sort of turn a whole bunch of those things that are a part of Western society and the Western diet and move them in your direction so that you're actually aging more slowly and becoming healthier. So that's
Thank
a
you.
nutshell.
Okay, thank you, Brandy.
Great. All right. So with those specific people, this is what I would say is, if we stop and look at stress for a moment, or our emotions, that was, as I was researching all of these things where I could see that people with multiple personality disorder just could have different ailments and different personalities, it was mind-blowing. And also looking at psychoneuroimmunology and just the awareness that stress affects the physical body. Now, something else that was mind-blowing was that our bodies are constantly repairing and replacing cells. Even medical research estimates we have a whole new skeleton approximately every 10 years. And I thought, well, wait a second. Then how is it possible for somebody to have that old football injury from high school? What about the body continuing to repair and replace the cells? And so that was something that really stuck out in my mind. And also multiple personality disorder it was amazing. So I started looking and I said, well, wait a second. I'm going to look at this objectively. We know that stress affects the body. That has been proven time and time again. But isn't there also somebody who's got PTSD, severe stress, who isn't sick? And what about somebody who's happy, who's still and retired and doesn't have that much stress, who's still sick? And I said, well, wait a second. What I began to figure out was that there are certain combinations of emotions that affect the physical body. That was the key, is the combination. And a simple way to think about it is like this, is if somebody wants to make cake and they have flour, they can't make cake. But if they add other ingredients, they can make cake. Now, if they have completely different ingredients, they have a completely different recipe and completely different outcome. And that's how I saw that it was possible for somebody with multiple personality disorder to have different ailments when they're in different personalities. Now, the point is from this is that to get the body to heal itself, we have to understand what those ingredients are. Now, to give you an example, one ingredient can be the awareness that a person in their self-image may start to see themselves as being a sick person. So if they've been sick for a long period of time, or maybe have a parent who's sick, they may identify as being somebody who's sick. So then it's in their identity. So they need to update that to being a healthy person. Now, another ingredient, if you will, and another emotional ingredient is the awareness that different emotions affect the body in a different way. And this is key. A simple way to think about it is like this, is if somebody's embarrassed, their face turns red. We know that. Emojis on our cell phones know that, which is a lot different than if somebody has a panic attack, racing heart, shortness of breath. Different emotion, which is different than a sexual thought, different for men or women, but we know there's the mind-body connection. Or if we hear something that we're disgusted by, what do we want to do? Oh, like vomit, right? So we can see different emotions affect the body differently, or if somebody can die from a broken heart. So we see different emotions. So a key to my success in helping people to get radical changes has been exactly that, has been to identify what are the specific emotions that are affecting the body. Because we know stress, there's people who are very stressed but aren't sick. And there's people who are retired who are. And so the combination of emotions was key. And also what's happening in the subconscious mind and understanding that they can be subconscious. And that is profound because, I mean, even if we look at current research, Harvard, there's research from Harvard that even shows that it suggests that stress can actually cause autoimmune conditions. And so we can see the correlation. And basically what it is it's identifying what is stress, negative emotions. It's about understanding which specific emotions and then changing those. And I would say that has been the key. So if I'm working with somebody with neck pain or back pain or POTS, tachycardia, or heart issues or autoimmune condition or whatever it is, it's identifying what specific emotions are affecting the body and switching those. And that's when I see a radical change occur. And something kind of to add to that, and I mentioned this in my book, but even there's medical studies, there's a research study that shows that was done on police officers that showed that a certain type of stress actually was connected to upper neck pain and back pain compared to lower back pain. And so we can even start to see more and more studies that are showing that where we can see evidence of, again, just different emotions affecting the body in a different way. And we know that, but that's ultimately what I would say is identify which specific emotion and then really look at creating the change and transforming these emotions. And another simple way, if we're going to expound upon that just a bit further, we could put it like this, and we could say that, if somebody has a stroke on the right side of their head, it can paralyze the left side of their body. And similarly, if they have a stroke on the left side of their head, it can affect the right side of their body. And so when we start to look at emotions going on in the brain, where are they showing up in the physical body? And if we're identifying which specific emotions and shutting those off, we then can have the body repair itself by understanding the brain-body connection.
Thank you. Michael, what exactly is redox imbalance, and why do you consider it central to all diseases?
Well, redox imbalance is a foundational dysregulation of oxidation and reduction reactions in the body. There are trillions of reactions going on in your body every minute, and most of them are redox reactions. And, they're tied to the production of energy, and so they're ubiquitous. And one of the things that happens when your body is under stress is that your cells overproduce oxidants. And in the old free radical theory of aging, free radicals or oxidants were viewed as causing damage. Around the 2000s to 2010s, scientists discovered that it wasn't just about damage, it's also about dysregulation. So redox imbalance is a state where the body begins to break down. There's damage, there's dysregulation of organ systems throughout the body. And so, again, this goes along rather nicely with what Brandy is talking about. I would say that my vision of stress is very broad. Hans Selye, the father of modern stress research, referred to stress as any demand on the body and that requires an adaptation. And so this includes emotions, but also physical stress, toxic stress, genetic stress, pathological stress like infections. And so that's part of what I'm trying to do, is to sort of bring people's awareness up of all the stressors that they are encountering, which then produce the redox imbalance, which then creates cascading effects throughout the body that lead to all sorts of different diseases. And we can sort of go in and look at individual pathologies and how they work, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But they are involved in pretty much, I call redox imbalance the necessary but insufficient cause of disease. And that means that it's always there, but it's always accompanied by some other stressor. So yeah, that's why it's involved in everything.
Thank you. Brandy, you mentioned that it was important to identify which emotion and then transform the emotion. So what do we do? What's the actual process you use once you realize that there's that you're holding on to a negative emotion, anger, resentment, blame, sadness, whatever your emotion that is causing you physical and emotional issues? How do you transform that emotion? How do you change your thinking? What is your methodology? What is your method? What is the thing that you could teach us about how to do this?
Absolutely. So I would say first and foremost, when we know that a negative emotion is affecting the body, the last thing we want to do is delve right into it. First, we want to reprogram and bring in the positive, because the more we bring in the positive, the easier it is to let go of the negative, and the more we can lift ourselves, the more it can speed up healing anyway. So that's one of the first things. When we look at different ingredients, I say, when we look at different emotional ingredients, optimism in and of itself can help speed up healing. Now, this is not just thinking optimistic, it's feeling optimistic, which is a big difference, because going through my injury, I was thinking optimistically, but I sure was not feeling. I was scared. I was in fear. I was frustrated. And so I had to genuinely shift that to feeling optimistic. And so that's what I would say. First and foremost, bring in the positive. The second is to understand that emotions are more complex than we realize. And that doesn't mean that we can't change them. It means that the more we just understand how they work, the easier it is. And that's the reason that I've been able to show back to back to back results under medical equipment, is that they are logical, but they have a different type of logic. And so one thing to think about is, after bringing in the positive, when we do address the negative, we identify what it is. We need to realize it's a pattern. And not only that, but the patterns repeat. So a way you can think about it is like this, is that if we look at repetition compulsion or reenactments or attachment theory, they basically, very simply put, we could say that if a woman has an abusive father, she could leave him and find the abusive boyfriend, boss, spouse, et cetera, et cetera. That pattern can continue. And we can all have compassion, but we know that patterns can unfortunately continue. And it's also referred to as re-victimization. So patterns continue, but more than people realize. So we may have a pattern of guilt or a pattern of self-criticism or a pattern of judgment. And so we need to understand that our brain repeats these patterns, and a lot of them are even established in childhood. And so if our brain is repeating these patterns, we have established neural pathways, we need to establish new neural pathways and ultimately deprogram the old neural pathway so our brain never goes down that path again. Now, when I said there's some complexities, there are, and if I mention one of them, it would be this. It would be understanding that our emotions also control our consciousness. And we don't really realize that. We don't see it because it's our consciousness, our perception. And a simple example is if we think about somebody who's really, really in love. So if they're really, really in love with somebody, what do they see? They see all the good in the person, not because they're trying to, but because that's what happens with our brain. Or if we're really upset or angry at somebody, what does the mind do? It fault finds in somebody. Not because we said fault find in this person, because our brain automatically does that. So our perception, our consciousness shifts based on how we're feeling. And this also happens with fear or with anger or upset on our subconscious programming. So what happens is that not only do we end up in these patterns, but then they perpetuate themselves. So it feels impossible to just get out of them. So it's not about just shift in emotion. It's about really understanding that we have to change a neural pathway or several, and we have to understand that we'll have a shift in awareness. And kind of another simple way to illustrate this is if you think about somebody, let's say somebody has a pattern of abandonment. They have a pattern of abandonment or rejection. And then let's say that pattern perpetuates. What can happen? They have that pattern, rejection, abandonment, fear of rejection, abandonment. What can happen is that in a relationship, they might then show up being really needy or afraid to connect. Both of these things can then perpetuate more abandonment, because then somebody's like too needy, or they don't connect and don't establish a connection, in which case then they feel abandoned. The person left because there was no connection. And so my point being is that there's a depth to it. There's an understanding that we have subconscious patterns, that we do need to establish new neural pathways, that we need to deprogram and reprogram the mind, that we understand that to create a real shift, the more that we can identify the pattern and create a strong radical shift, that's when we create radical results. And so I would say really learning to master the mind. But what's beautiful is as we get out of these patterns, it becomes pivotal. We feel happier and better. And not only that, but the body is able to heal. And what I love also is, if we think about Freud's work, about Sigmund Freud, he was well known for taking women or people who had hysterically, had all this trauma, and he would help them to shift their subconscious mind, that they didn't even realize that they had a subconscious mind at that point, but to help them to make changes in the subconscious mind that would be pivotal for them. And so basically that's what I've done regarding healing, is understanding that these emotions can affect us. And if we have a combination such as self-image or, just different specific emotions and changing those. And so I would say that I make it sound ridiculously easy, but there's also a depth to it. And the more that we understand emotions and how they work and neural pathways and reprogramming the mind, the more it transforms our lives.
Thank you. Michael, Brandy just said that we need to deprogram and reprogram the brain, or change a neural pathway, and master the mind. Is this along the lines of what you believe also?
I mean, there are elements of that. Like, for example, if you're finding that more traditional modalities are not working, I often find that there are things like post-traumatic stress, early life stress, adverse childhood experiences. I mean, there are things, the foundational need of human beings is to believe that we are safe and that people can be trusted. And if you don't have those at a very deep level, you will always be in fight or flight mode. This is something where, if something bad is always going to happen, you're always looking over your shoulder. And fight or flight mode is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. You have a nervous system. It has two pieces. One is the sympathetic side, which is fight or flight, and the other is the parasympathetic side, which is rest and repair, or otherwise known as feed and breed. And that imbalance, I mean, the body, that system needs to be balanced. And if you have if you've experienced trauma, that balance gets put off, and you just simply can't get out of it, and it's very corrosive. Like it's in opposition to your ability to repair your body, and so that's something that I would say goes along very well with what Brandy is saying. I would also highlight, we don't know all the stressors. This is actually something that in exposome research, which is the study of your collective exposures throughout life, starting at basically in the uterus, we can study that the molecules in your blood that will tell you everything that you've experienced in life. At this point, we don't quite know what all those mean and what their importance is. And so there can be chemical exposures that we have no idea we experienced. And this is the stuff that I expect to get sorted out over the coming decade as we learn more about these things. But, we all have exposures to cleaning fluids and environmental toxins, radiation, sound, light, all these molds, whatever. And these are all stressors unto themselves, but we may not know they're involved. And so that's one of the things that, I would say I am looking forward to a really truly holistic view of health that includes exposures, including the kind of early life stress exposures, but also toxic exposures, pathological exposures, etc. Also about genetics and its role in disease, and also the biochemistry of how our body breaks down under stress and in aging, where all these things, I think, are coming in and affecting our stress load, our stress burden, along with things like social determinants of health. So, for example, if you live in the United States and you are an immigrant, your stress burden is going to be significantly higher than somebody who was born here. It's just the way it works. And your health outcomes, I mean, we know there are studies that show that that immigrants have worse health outcomes, and you can link it right to stress. So that's, I'm not quite sure if I've fully answered the question, but that may be a good place to stop off.
Why don't you follow up with, what is your 10-step resilience program?
I mean, if you look at my 10-step resilience program, it's kind of philosophical, because in essence, I'm trying to look at this from a kind of precision health or personalized medicine approach, where we are actually treating the person, not a population, right? Like when you go to the doctor right now, you receive FDA-approved population-based therapies. These have been proven to work on a population, but not necessarily on you. And so yeah, my 10-step program. I start off by making a plan, a personal health plan, and I've done this myself. I took it to my doctor, who promptly didn't look at it. And so I got another doctor. And so in essence, I am trying to model for myself how I think the healthcare system should work. Beyond the personal health plan, adopting a new paradigm, right? Again, and here I'm looking to the future with precision medicine and personalized medicine and a more holistic model. And so in essence, I am trying to help people change the way they think about health and disease. And to do that, I have come up with what I call the Redox Health Proposition, which is 17 words, which is: stress causes disease, redox imbalances why, eustress boosts resilience to future stress, lifestyle is key, and resilience is trackable. And the rest of the program is pretty much going through those 5 main ideas that we're going to create. We're going to change our paradigm. We're going to create and curate a collection of resilience habits that keep us in a proper redox state and a non-inflammatory state. And then we're going to measure what we're doing and track our progress, and then focus in on individual health issues that we are concerned about. And that's the basic outline of the 10-step program, including I end up with thinking bigger, because one of the things that I feel is true about the notion that stress causes disease is that it has societal ramifications. How we do work, how we care for the environment, how we structure our cities, all these things have impact on our quality of life, our stress levels, etc.
Thank you. Brandy, you said that we need to deprogram and reprogram the brain or change a neural pathway. We need to master the mind. That sounds great. Bring in the positive. So, okay, so how do you do this? I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Why don't you answer? How do we deprogram, reprogram the brain and master the mind? How do we do that?
Well, I would say, okay, so one thing is really placing a strong emphasis on emotions. Okay, so when we stop and look at emotions for a moment, we've all heard emotions. We know stress affects the physical body, but if we start to look beyond what we know, like beyond the simplicity of it, we can also look at the awareness that our emotions are connected to biochemistry. So the more emotion, so if we feel the emotion of love, or we feel the emotion of stress, like, or negativity, so the more we can feel is key. So I would say that now when we stop and think about it, okay, so let's go here. So simplifying it. Okay, so how do we do it? How do we okay, so basically what I'm stumbling, and it's because of this. It's because it's understanding, let's be honest. We know that there are celebrities who have been here and there and everywhere and still have ended their lives because of depression. And so integrity is a huge thing to me. And so I can make it sound super simple because in some ways it is. And I can also be honest and say there are blocks to it because there are. And that's what's true. And so if I said, so I always want to take care to not oversimplify, but also to not make it sound too complex that it's not doable, because it is. And I see people do it all of the time. And I see people heal themselves from all kinds of things. And it's incredible. And we have to understand the brain better. And a simple example is like this. Okay, so how do we do it? We identify the negative. We know also that we have to we amplify the positive. Now, to create a new neural pathway, a simple way to think about it is like this, is if you think about a field of grass, you think about walking through the grass. If somebody takes a different path through the grass every day, they never create a path. But if they go the same way over and over and over and over again, they create a path. Think about it like this, is if we're learning the alphabet. How does somebody learn the alphabet? They repeat it over and over and over and over again. And then by doing so, they ingrain that information in. And so to be able to create a neural pathway, we have to repeat the pattern. Now, all of the time when it comes to positivity, people will say things like, I'm just going to think positive, which is like, I'm just going to go through the grass anyway, as long as it never creates a path. So I would say creating that neural pathway, we have to understand that we need to amplify the emotion. I would say another thing that is very key is this. We have to understand that the brain typically, pretty much every time that I've worked with somebody with health issues, there's something miswired in the brain. And a simple way to think about miswired is if we think about, like, if I use a kind of a radical example, is that a cutter, somebody who cuts themselves, can experience feelings of relief or euphoria from cutting themselves, and so we can see that information can get miswired. Now, similarly, a person may link up love to sympathy. If they have love linked up to sympathy, and we need love as human beings, then they need sympathy. They need problems, which means they need to have a health issue. They need to have negative things going on in their life all of the time to be able to get love, because that's how they get love. Or even if a person has pride in hardship. Now, if you think about it, people, of course, want to get rid of hardship. But if pride is connected to hardship, people don't want to get rid of their pride. And so what happens is then we become in these situations where we want to get rid of patterns, but we also can't simultaneously. Or we have feelings of fear or feeling unsafe. So there's all of these things that we need to understand, that the brain can get miswired and gets linked up. So everything that we're holding on to for a reason. Like, for example, somebody goes through a trauma, they may hold on to it because there's part of them that expects it to happen again. Now, if you say to a person, just let it go, well, that's nice in theory, but we can't just let it go. And so it's understanding that we have to reprogram the mind so we feel safe, so we feel loved, so we can really ultimately change the mindset. Now, I would say that there's also things that can block the mind. Now, some people might think, well, wait a sec, our minds can be blocked. But think about this. We've all heard before of maybe a writer who has writer's block, somebody who's trying to think about what to write and they just can't think about it. Their mind is blocked. Or somebody who's trying to think about their childhood and they can't remember their childhood. So my point being is our brain can block us. And so it's ultimately, keeping it simple. We must establish new neural pathways by repeating certain information. We must understand why the brain is miswired. Is love connected to sympathy? Or do we feel like anger is keeping us safe? Or sometimes what will happen is somebody might, let's say they have a pattern of self-criticism. If you've ever heard somebody before say, I look terrible in this blazer, and somebody else says, no, you don't, you look great. What happens? Those two things get linked up. All I have to do is criticize myself. Somebody else says, no, it's great. Compliments get linked up to self-criticism. And so what happens is in a million different ways, the brain can be miswired. And so it's about understanding the miswiring. And if we look at this for a moment, because, if somebody had told me that I could heal myself with my mind, I would have thought a couple of things. I would have thought, this is impossible, mind over matter. Somebody doesn't understand my situation. I probably would have been offended. But this is what's kind of great with research coming out. Even last year, the Surgeon General released a report about loneliness, how loneliness can increase heart disease, diabetes, stroke, all of these things, loneliness. And so we can see evidence of this. And even there was another, there's so many studies that we can look at back to back to back that shows the importance of stress. We could also look at the awareness that our minds actually also influence biophoton emissions, so our energy of the body. And a lot of people are overlooking the energy of the body and understanding that. So I would say that there's so many different ways that we can see the connection, but I would say that ultimately we must add in new programming and we must get good at creating new neural pathways. And how do we do that? We create repetition in emotions. And a simple way to think about that is the alphabet, except for in this case, it's emotions and understanding that. And we have to get that in. Now, by the way, a lot of people, they immediately think, if they heard mind body healing before, they immediately think gratitude. I'm going to start bringing in gratitude. And I did that. And I got to say, it didn't work so well. And this is the reason why. I had survivor's guilt from 9/11. That was part of what affected me, was survivor's guilt. Now imagine here I am with survivor's guilt going, I'm so grateful for my life. I'm so grateful for my life. I didn't realize at the time that I had survivor's guilt, but it wasn't helpful. It increased the block instead of decreasing it. Now, a lot of people may have patterns of guilt or bad or self-criticism or unworthy or not deserving or all of these things in which they start bringing in gratitude and they don't feel really grateful because there's blocks. And so my point being is it is about being specific. It's about identifying how you want to feel, making sure there are certain emotions that fuel our health. Even going back to the Surgeon General, the statement loneliness affects our health. It absolutely does. We need to be loved. But I don't want to say love is healing, because it can be healing. Love can be healing, but love can also be miswired to sympathy, which then needs a problem. So there's complexities to it. And so I don't want to discount that either. And so ultimately, I call it the gift in healing. So step G is get new healthy mind programming. So that's about optimism, positive expectation and optimism, amplifying your emotions, feeling them really, really strong. So it's gift, G-I-F-T. I is identify what are the blocks, what are the negative emotions that are affecting the body. F has to do with freeing yourself. So understanding how to free yourself. So part of it has to do with release techniques. The other part has to do with understanding why your brain is holding on to it. Does it feel like it's safe? Does it feel like it's helping you? Is your pride connected to hardship? What is the problem? Why is your brain holding on to it? Everything our brain does, it does for a reason. And then step T has to do with transformation, stepping into the transformation. So we don't want to just live in our heads, but step into the transformation. How do we embody this change with our actions so it becomes a real transformation? And so that's the way we ultimately, I ultimately have people do that.
Thank you. Michael, you've spoken about the importance of mental resilience. What daily practices do you recommend for strengthening mental resilience?
Well, I'm a big fan of Qigong and yoga. Qigong is a Chinese practice that is known as the art of effortless energy. It's a collection of exercise that I could imagine doing until I'm 90. And my Apple Watch doesn't even know that I'm exercising when I do it. What I like about Qigong is, in addition to just simply both Qigong and yoga involve breathing in particular ways. The Qigong is about energy flow. And there's a whole bunch of things that are particularly useful about simply stimulating the body in ways that get circulation going, get the lymphatic system going, stimulate acupressure points. I mean, and these all have really significant effects on rebalancing the nervous system. And so when I think about the mind-body exercises, a lot of it is stimulating what's called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve stretches from the brain to every organ in the body. And when you stimulate the vagus nerve, all sorts of really good things happen. And it's a strategy for rebalancing the autonomic nervous system. And one of the things that's very clear about Western society is that we spend most of our time in sort of sympathetic hyperactivation, fight or flight, whether it's deadlines at work or a diet that sort of dysregulates our stress response and keeps the stress response going. Those are all big deals and frankly, almost never mentioned in traditional medical contexts. And if you have hypertension, high blood pressure, there are connections to sympathetic, parasympathetic imbalance. And so a lot of what I am doing on a daily basis is trying, and this is somewhat new for me, like I like to run and do other things that are sort of cardiovascular exercises, but I'm trying to balance out those kinds of more physical exercises with these other disciplines that are more mind-body and rebalancing oriented, which I can actually see in there's a metric called heart rate variability, which measures very subtle variations in the heart rhythm. And one of the things about HRV is people who are athletes have a lot of variability. So their heart rate variability may be 100. But somebody who is old and out of shape, it may be 10, 15. And heart rate variability is a really great metric for understanding whether your nervous system is in balance. And so that's sort of that's what I do personally. I do some meditation, but those are the basics.
Thank you. Brandy, what percent of health conditions do you believe can be healed with the power of mind?
I believe that pretty much every health condition to an extent. I mean, I would say that some people come in to this world with physical disabilities that are, that are not going to be really able to heal with the mind body. But I would say for the most part, everything that I've ever seen, there's always some type of mind body connection. And by the way, I'm wondering, would I be able to share my screen just for a moment on the image?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So we'll just take one quick minute right here. And what I want to do is just show you, because I know a lot of people, for me personally, this is a medical study that I had published last year. So this is in August, and it's a few case studies that are in a medical journal. But I know for me personally, the idea of healing with the mind just seems impossible. And I had been doing all the meditation, the all of the things, and it wasn't working. And so kind of if I just take one of these pictures and blow it up for a moment, if we look at this person right here, and if I explain this real quick, okay, so these images are 22 minutes apart. Okay. And so a simple way to describe this is that like if somebody has an infection or illness, or you've had maybe a sprained ankle or injury or whatever, it can radiate heat from the body. And so that's what this is medical thermal imaging. And if we look at the scan with the red all over the neck and the back area, this woman is experiencing a level 5.5 of pain in her neck and upper back. And I basically just showed her how to use her mind. So I helped identify the specific emotions. And as we can see, 22 minutes later, her pain was actually at a 0.5. And so her pain was pretty much gone at this level. And and so you can see the difference. And you can see that now this one took longer. This one took about 47 minutes. Now this one is one that I love. If we come down here we go. So this one right here, it took him 28 minutes, and he went from a level 6 of pain to a 0 of pain. Now, what I love about this also is after he got up, he was like, I'm shocked. And he said, because he had just come from a 10-day meditation retreat and also a positivity thinking seminar. And I added that in the medical study. Now, with all of these people, I said, make sure to follow through. But my point is we can see it's not just mind over matter. It's actual, like it's creating a real emotional shift to get that change. And I tell people, if you go back into the negative, it's going to come back. And so, but I've seen people who have, from all kinds of things, not just pain. I worked with a woman who just reached out, who 2017, she was bedridden before that, worked through the process, has healed herself. She's running and doing everything else. And it's been now 7 years. So she's, so I see the most incredible things. But my point being is we can see the change. It doesn't have to take forever, because that's something I had been doing. I had been meditating in the affirmations and the gratitude and the frequencies and the binaural beats and all of the things, the positive thinking, the visualization, and it wasn't working. And sure, I could get my pain down at times, but it didn't change my life. It didn't heal my body until I said, okay, let me really identify the specific things. And that was pivotal for me. I did the theta state, the delta state for years. Finally, I said, okay, I have to figure this out. And so that was pivotal.
Okay. So for both of you, and by the way, if anyone would like to ask a question, please raise your hands. So for both of you, I guess one basic question is, a lot of our audience will not eat a pint of ice cream because we feel like we're trained that you just no matter what, you don't have ice cream. We don't have sugar. We won't have bacon. This is just, we're listening to speakers and we're very conditioned. But a lot of us are very sloppy with our thinking. We're grouchy, we're grumpy, we're judgmental, we're angry, we're resentful, we're blaming. We feel nothing about hating someone if they don't agree with us, or, if they eat the Atkins diet, we hate them. If they eat the wrong political party, we're judgmental. That's how it is. Are you saying, yeah, that's no big deal? Or are you saying, just as militant as you are about not smoking cigarettes, you should be militant about not using things that close your heart, like judgment and anger and resentment? Or are you saying you're not really saying that? It's how strongly should we be about choosing thoughts that keep our heart open as opposed to ones that close it? Because there's a lot of people I might be grouchy about, but if I really thought this was like a real important thing, maybe I'd be a lot more careful about the emotions that I use that are negative and judging and shut my heart.
I would say yes. It's absolutely as important. When you think about it for a moment, to Michael's point, we know that free radicals, redox, we know free radicals are connected to health issues. That has been shown back to back to back to back to back. We know that. But we also know that large studies of antioxidants have all failed. And so for a variety of different reasons, and sometimes when they amplify them, there's been illness attached. So my point is that we can try to fix the body and try to fix the body and try to fix the body. But ultimately what I see is the mind decides. Our emotions also decide whether or not the body wants to heal. I mean, even DNA. So we can go through like extreme exercise. DNA repairs in 24 hours, 24, I think up to 72 hours. There's studies that show that. So my point is yes, we should watch what we eat. Absolutely. And not only that, but let's be honest. Food can be emotional eating. There's so many emotions that are connected to food. And so, yes, but I would say ultimately what I've seen, that the mind-body connection is so important. It's like our bodies, that ultimately stress is that impactor. Just like we can see in a minute, somebody can be, I guess kind of let's put the example of this is that we know that Steve Jobs, wonderful guy. Some people may love him, maybe may not, but vegan, vegetarian, all of these things, meditated since he was a teenager, and yet he didn't heal himself. And so I would say the missing key component is the mind. And I think that creating that real change is pivotal. So yeah, absolutely. And I would say at a deep level. So not just controlling our daily thoughts, but a real pattern change, a consciousness shift is key.
I would add to that, first of all, the antioxidant paradox is actually a factor of not measuring, right? Like, in other words, that in the 90s, there was the antioxidants good, oxidants bad. We've learned that that's not true. Low-level oxidants are actually beneficial. They raise our resilience level. And, part of measurement is an interesting thing that I want to bring in here, which is, part of what you're saying, Brandy, is that, the mind is doing something to the body. And I'm over here on the sort of classic biochemistry saying, okay, you can measure that, right? And it is challenging because one of the things about oxidative stress is all those reactions are happening so fast that in some respects, until just recently, it has been impossible to measure actual oxidative reactions going on. You had to look at the downstream effects, which would be like oxidized lipids and oxidized proteins and oxidized carbohydrates and sugars. And so, part of where I go in this thing is to say, okay, let's look at what is your inflammatory status. And one of the easiest ways to do that, that I have found in the current, like we're working with the system as it is, right? One of the challenges is we've got the system we've got, and so how do we work with it? Well, you will get something called the complete blood count with differential. And in that are blood types, types of white blood cells called lymphocytes and neutrophils. If you turn that into a ratio, neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, that gives you a really interesting view of your inflammatory oxidant state. It's not technically, it's not technically a redox measure, but it is something where if your NLR is above 2, you probably are symptomatic and you are probably in a pro-oxidant, pro-inflammatory state. So to some degree, some combination here where we look at this and say, wow, my NLR and my inflammation levels are high. I wonder if my mindset is playing into that, or whether it's something else. Do I have time for an anecdote here?
Okay.
Okay. So my father was a violinist. In his 70s and 80s, he got osteoarthritis, and his fingers started to bend, and he had pain, and it was really disturbing to him because he could no longer play his instrument. I looked at that and I said, okay, what are the stressors? Well, it turns out he's taking Nexium for acid reflux. And I'd read literature on what are called PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, that say they block magnesium absorption in the gut. Okay, data point. I had also read research that said low magnesium status is associated with osteoarthritis in the hand. Okay, so I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take you off of Nexium. We're going to supplement with magnesium and give you polyphenols to stimulate NRF2, which raises your antioxidant capacity and lowers inflammation. And it took about 6 months, but his fingers straightened out and his pain went away. Now, bear in mind that osteoarthritis is an incurable disease, at least by most medical estimates. And it's an erosive disease that just simply keeps getting worse. Well, it turns out more recent research says it's actually an inflammatory disease, or there's an inflammatory component. So on the one hand, it took 6 months. On the other hand, it's an incurable disease. And he was, the interesting thing was it didn't even hit him for probably days and even weeks that his pain was gone. It was just so gradual. It just went away. And so nothing quite as dramatic as Brandy has talked about, but at the same time, that was something where you identify the stressor that's involved, you remediate it in some reasonable way, and then you help the body heal and sort of re-regulate itself. And indeed, the body has remarkable healing capacity. So yeah, and we're basically in agreement on all that.
Thank you. Joe, would you like to ask a question, or where are you from?
Yeah, Long Island, New York. And Brandy, I'd like to direct this perhaps to you. And my question is that I feel like I practice a mindful positivity. And I've been much more aware about this over the course of the last year as a result of having finding a kind of a tumor in my left kidney, which seems to be doing quite well. In fact, I'm shrinking it as we speak. And but I'm concerned that underlining in my life is a kind of an aggressiveness about me that comes out when I'm in the closet trying to pull out an ironing board and the vacuum is in the way. And I'm quite aggressive about it. And it seems to pop up a lot. If I'm backing out of my car and the garbage pail is in my way, I'm aggressive about it. To me, that's not being kind and loving and good to myself when I'm that aggressive over simple things that just kind of overpower me a little bit. I feel a little powerless. Like, why can't I put my finger on that and like cool that jets down on that?
I have to say, first and foremost, one, I love that your tumor is shrinking. That is awesome. Two, I love your self-awareness and your self-honesty. It is so beautiful. And three, a simple thing that I would do is even if you start repatterning it. So let's say you notice that you made a mistake, right? And what we normally do, what do? We beat ourselves up. Oh man, I messed that up. I would start repatterning. I just call it reset mind reprogramming, and just go, okay, wait, reset, and go through, like, let's say that you got upset. Well, you can't undo it, but you could go, okay, wait, reset, and then play out what you want your response to be. So you're retraining your brain to start responding in a new way. And what you'll notice is the more you just catch yourself, and then you'll maybe make a mistake. Okay, don't beat yourself up. You just say, okay, reset. Oh, well, let me go ahead and do this instead. So start enacting your actual programming. And what will happen is you'll help repattern and build those new neural pathways to make a habit of responding differently. And it makes it easy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Reset's a good word. It could almost be a mantra for me. So I appreciate that. I feel like I needed that. So thank you very much. And thanks, Steve, for the great panel tonight.
You're so welcome. And
Janet, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yes, hi, I'm from Maryland. And Brandy, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your story, I mean, just how exactly, what was the process that you got out of your pain, out of your wheelchair? And did, you know, what was the process? What were the steps? And then did you do it all by yourself, or did you have somebody, a practitioner working with you? I mean, how exactly did you do it?
A long story short, I mean, long story short is this, is that, so I was wheelchair, walker, cane. I was a mess. I wasn't paralyzed. So I could get around very, very short distances with like a walker or a cane, very short. And I was in extreme pain. And so, and most of my time, I spent a lot of time in bed. And so, I mean, the long story short, first and foremost, I thought that the placebo was based on belief. So after diet, supplements, all of those things didn't work, I started looking at the mind. I had got to be part of a medical study of a new trial experiment. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to give me my life back. Long story short, it was a failed experiment. The doctor said, hey, you're not going to get better. You can't be a part of the study. And I thought, well, I'll figure out my own kind of feeling. But that's what made me start looking at the placebo. And so at first I was gratitude for healing and trying all of these things, and it wasn't working. And I had thought at the time, because let's be honest, the placebo, it can change the biochemistry of the body. And so I thought, you know, it's just based on belief. When that wasn't working, as I was researching medical journals, I found something called the open label placebo, which is exactly like it sounds. It is open label. So both the doctor and the patient both know it's fake, and it still works. And so that's what made me start researching more and more of the medical journals. And I would say, you know, you said, how did I do it? I just, you know, the more I saw things with multiple personality disorder, I really was researching everything from metaphysics to quantum physics to psychoneuroimmunology to even the Bible. It says 3,000 years ago, a merry heart is a medicine to the body. Ill thoughts will dry the bones. So it was really about getting in touch with my emotions. And I didn't think I had any emotions, because I always thought you can plow through anything, mind over matter, you know, doesn't. And so I was trying to do that. Now I would say, as far as, there was a lot of things that I would say I failed a lot. Like I mentioned that I had been doing meditation and affirmations and the binaural beats and the phantom phrase frequency and the theta, all of that stuff. Basically, a long story short, I got to a point that, you know, after years that wasn't working. And so that's what made me say, okay, look, let me just pinpoint this specific thing. Now, what I found as I was tuning in is I found that I had a trigger from 9/11, from September 11th. And I had this feeling of wanting to die for others and also expecting to die. And the crazy thing, the reason I would have never thought that it was that I wasn't even in New York at the time. But I mentioned that I did network engineering and operations. I worked in California at the time, and my shift was 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. So I was on the phone with colleagues in the trade towers when that hit. And so my colleague was, you know, yelling like, help me, help me, help me. And so either way, it created like this trauma in my brain. And so I had the survivor's guilt. I had the feeling of expecting to die. So all of this stuff. So I would say that it was about understanding how to use my mind, how to clear my emotions, understanding why they're tricky. And then, I mean, there's down to details. And you say, did I have practitioners? I mean, I had a physical therapist who would come over and she would tape me with like kinesiology tape from like the back of my neck to all the way to my feet. She was a lovely person. So, I mean, I was taped up a lot. I mean, so I had my doctors and help and whatnot. I mean, all kinds of things. I mean, even to the point of when I started to get rid of my walker and cane and all of that, I had such a tendency to use my hands to walk. I mean, there were things that I did that were even like sitting on a yoga ball, like a big yoga ball. And to get my balance back, I would even just sit on the ball and I would tip the ball to the side and then put my leg out and then tip to the ball to the other side. And then, so, I mean, even to the point of rebuilding my reflexes so they were back in my leg. So I would say, I mean, it did so many things, but I would say, you know, to get my my physical balance back and my gait back. So I would say, I mean, there was so many things I did, but I would say that understanding the emotions, and really tuning in, understanding how they work, and creating that shift and I know I'm rushing through it because I feel like I'm taking up too much time. And so I'm like trying to give you as much as I can in the shortest period of time without being rude to anybody else. So I'll give it back to Stephen. But I mean, Steve, if you have any other specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm trying to be thoughtful at the same time.
Okay, just quickly, Bob, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yes, Brandy, this is a question.
Yeah.
I'm from South Florida. This question has to do with metaphysics and quantum, physics. What it has to do with getting in touch with something that's a larger power than you. However you understand the God in your life, or some sort of healing. There's a whole system called Mary Baker Eddy Christian Science. Did you use any of that? Getting in touch with something larger than yourself, the universe, the God of your understanding.
So to answer your question, I would say that I am very technical and I'm also very woo. So I can my intuition, my taking in information, all of that. So I would say yes. And what I would also say is we're all saying the same thing in different ways. And meaning that I've given talks absolutely in churches, again, referring back to the Bible, a merry heart is a medicine to the body. Ill thoughts will dry the bones. Mary Baker Eddy, love her. But I would say that if you're mentioning quantum physics, if you will, it's everything we could put it in so many different ways. For example, okay, so if we look at the energy of the body, our bodies emit biophotons, particles of light energy. Now, a lot of people think that energy is just a spiritual concept or a metaphysical concept. However, the gentleman who discovered it initially, Alexander Gershwin, medical science, who medically discovered it. Now, he initially called it mitogenetic radiation. Now, what's profound is that he was nominated for the Nobel Prize 11 times and actually won in Russia, similar to a Nobel Prize. That was 100 years ago, 1920s. Now, the point from that is, number one, we have this energy of the body. And if we fast forward, there's even a database that is under the NASA agreement that shows that our bodies are emitting this light energy. Now, if we want to take in metaphysics or biblical or anything like that, if you think about angels, we're always depicted with halos, light energy over their heads. So it's all whatever terminology we want to use, but a way to think about biophotons or mitogenetic radiation, because the mitogenetic radiation was now labeled biophotons, is a simple way to think about it is like this, is if you think about a light bulb, it emits particles of light. And it's called photons, or the sun emits particles of light, photons. Now, our body emits biophotons because it's a biological organism, or plants emit biophotons. And so these particles of light have been shown to affect healing and cellular proliferation. These particles of light also have been shown to, like cancer. Cancerous cells emit different biophoton frequencies than non-cancerous cells. Diabetes, people who have diabetes emit different patterns and frequencies of biophotons than people without diabetes. And so we can see there's a correlation, and that was a huge part of my research also. But if we simplify what it comes down to, research has shown there's a direct correlation between our thoughts and emotions and our biophotons emissions. So if we change our emotions or we change our way of thinking, we can also see different patterns of biophoton emissions. So my point is, I think it's all spiritual, and we could call it energy, we could call it biophotons, we could call it the halo, the energy of the universe, divine, God. My biggest goal, I always say, God, universe, energy, divine, mother nature, whatever you want to call it, universe, because my biggest goal is to understand that whatever religion we want to call it, that this energy does exist in us, and our thoughts and emotions actually direct it. And so, so the short answer is yes, and the bigger answer is it's all interconnected. Does that?
Yes, thank you very much. Michael, how do we follow up with you if we want to stay in touch with you or get more information?
My email address is info@redoxhealth.org, and I'm happy to respond to questions.
Great, thank you very much. And Brandy, any final thoughts, and how do we stay in touch with you?
Final thoughts. This is what I'd like to say is that healing with the mind is even in the Bible. When it says, a merry heart is a medicine to the body, ill thoughts will dry the bones, or life and death is in the power of the tongue. My point being, healing is literally written in every spiritual and metaphysical practice for thousands of years. And my hope is that it's our generation that makes it a reality, whether we call it stress healing or metaphysical, like it's all around us. And my hope is that it's our generation that starts using the mind, that actually understands we can get results and that we're so much more amazing than we realize.
Thank you. I apologize, Michael, any final thoughts for you?
No, just glad to be here. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, great. Thank you both very much. And can we open up the mic so everyone could say thank you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
So interesting.
Thank you.